live from Mildura, this is Paul Murray Live, Our Town.
G'day Mildura! How good is this? We are in the far northwest of Victoria right now, beautiful Mildura, where the produce is fabulous, the people are amazing, and the gin here at Fossey's Distillery will be tasted the second we're off the air. Now, there's plenty to get to tonight, including all of my thoughts on the news of the day. But as always, you know, I like to make the most of my time in a regional town, and this place has been spectacular. Again, the food, the people, even got a chance to go to the local theatre, which was fantastic. But obviously, you also get to see me at what I like to call my peak best. As you know, upon birth, my parents were pleased to say they had a boy. But then the Institute of Sport walked in and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Murray, he's going to be an unco." You're going to see that in BMX form, in roller derby form, and on mountain biking. All of that a little ahead here as I slowly make my... Wow, what a look, eh? How good did I do? God love you. All right, well, you can watch a fat man fall over in a moment or two's time. In the meantime, plenty of things to talk about that are in the news right now, including a bit weather-related. Believe it or not, of course, MotoGP, the motorcycle racing, was at Phillip Island today, and they had several delays. Why? Because it was absolutely pelting down. I mention this because at the other end of the country, New South Wales and Queensland, bushfires have been in play for the past couple of days. Our thoughts are with everyone who's battling them, the great volunteers who fight them. Please pay attention to your local authorities, regardless of what happens. Expectation is going to be rather that temperatures are a little bit higher in Queensland in the next couple of days, so things are going to be a problem. So stay safe. Now, I'll get in trouble when I say this, but who cares? I'm amongst friends, so I'll gladly do it. China pulled off an incredible act of interference in our last federal election. It started way before the federal election, when absolutely no proof whatsoever that the Institute of Virology that was playing around with bat viruses, of course, ended up giving birth to COVID-19. The story was that China, once it started to leak from Wuhan, stopped domestic flights because they thought there was something that was going to spread. But international flights, they continued. The world, of course, resulted in huge shutdowns and, to this day, disruption that exists amongst us. But, of course, I say that China interfered in our last federal election because they punished Australia for pointing out that China was, of course, where all of this got out of control. The way they decided to punish us was by putting a series of economic sanctions on a whole bunch of products, including wine, which affects regions like this, all the way through to the lobster trade. And remember, even there was a time when they thought there was a problem with our coal. Funnily enough, when they needed the coal, they didn't any longer see a problem. Not just economically punishing the former government, they also cut the ties between 1.2 million Australians of Chinese descent and the information that they were getting in their own language via the social media platform WeChat. Remember, the former Prime Minister, his account was cut off in the middle of the night, yet all of the other candidates that were running against him were able to communicate with that population. The result, of course, was, as you know, 1.2 million Chinese voters, based off the information that they were getting, heavily regulated by what was coming through the WeChat platform controlled by Beijing, changed their votes. Now, these were voters who had voted for Scott Morrison in 2019. They had voted for Turnbull even in 2016. And even if you go back and look at several seats that flipped hands that had huge Chinese populations, they had previously voted Liberals before that. So what had changed? Well, of course, the message that was coming out of China, the need for Australia to be punished because Australia said, OK, China, we're going to treat you like everywhere else in the world. And when something this wrong leaks everywhere, guess what? We want to know what happened. Well, of course, the result was that those votes flipped enough seats for the government to be robbed of its majority. The Teal seats made sure that it was guaranteed that a bloke who got just 33% of the vote, yes, the bloke who did even worse than his own referendum, actually was able to become the Prime Minister due to the preference world that we currently live in. And because the Chinese government had successfully sent the message to Australia that if you try to stand up to them, they will ruin you economically and then politically. Well, of course, this Prime Minister was rewarded with audiences with Chinese officials to be able to thaw the relationship, to be able to bring it back on track, to being one of mutual respect, where literally the bully blamed the one that they were bullying. Well, today, yet another of those economic punishments have been removed ahead of the Prime Minister going to Beijing as well as Washington in the next few days. It's good news for this area because the wine industry was unfairly targeted by China as a way of punishing Australia because of the politicians that we voted for who made the bizarre decision to stand up to China after a global pandemic killed millions and destroyed our economies in part to this day. Inflation remains a huge result of the lockdowns that, of course, happened as a result of what happened in COVID. That's why we have to keep talking about this. If it was any other political power that had sought to punish us politically and economically, they would talk about it. But because it's China, because so much of the media is either okay with the way that China plays, or so many people in business or academia are connected to China, they'll never get called out. But think about it. What changed in those seats between 2013, 16, 19 and 22? The attitude of Beijing towards Australia. Well, the good news is, as I say, the wine tariffs are about to be removed. It'll be one of the many victories the Prime Minister will claim when, of course, him becoming the Prime Minister, or should I say the rejection of the previous, was, of course, what China wanted at all. Now, tonight here in Mildura, wine is a big part of the business here. In fact, in one of our reports from Georgia Simpson a bit later in the show, they talk about the financial pain of this economic punishment.
And a lot of that was of our exports were going to Europe, but that suffered because of the war in Ukraine as well. And of course, China's been a big problem, very big problem.
What has also been changed by this government to make China happier? An announcement was made this week that the tariff that Australia places on Chinese-made wind farms is suddenly going to disappear. So we know the solar panels, which are going to cover much of regional Australia, are made by slave labour in Chinese worker camps, but shh, don't tell anyone, we need to save the planet. Well, these towers, which of course will also be around by their tens, nay, hundreds of thousands over the next few years, well, Australia used to put a tariff on them because, of course, they were being made in China in the hope that one day they would be made here. But because, guess what? We even import things like concrete in Australia. Where from again? Oh, that's right, China. China gets, again, what it wants. But then there was this hilarious decision from the Albanese government. Remember during the previous election campaign when the Port of Darwin was a serious political issue, one so much so that many Labor figures, including the Prime Minister, said that the former government had failed to tear up the contract of a Chinese-owned company being able to control a port that is so vital to a place where the US Marines are also based.
Connected very directly with the government of the People's Republic of China. At the time that happened, we opposed it. I was the infrastructure minister, shadow minister at the time.
When Labor was bringing Marines to Darwin, this government was selling the Port of Darwin to China. That's actually the record of this government.
Of course, an asset like the Port of Darwin, I believe, should have stayed in public hands.
So, of course, Albo, at his first opportunity, tore up the contract, right? No. He's been sitting on a report for, count them, 4 months. 4 months that he now put into action on Friday when he hoped that nobody was noticing, when people would be distracted by what's happening in Israel and, again, trying to suck a favour with the people who he hopes will continue to keep seats out of the hands of his political opponents. Albo is each way Albo. Why? Because he says one thing and then ends up doing another. He's going to do something about the Port of Darwin, but guess what they did on Friday? They approved the Port of Darwin. And the 99-year lease that they said they were going to tear up is going to remain in place. So now it's the Liberal Party's turn to say, bad call.
The Prime Minister himself called the initial decision by the Northern Territory government a grave error of judgment. And on Friday, he didn't even stand up. He released instead a press release on a Friday afternoon and hoped that no one would see it. And I think that's poor form from the Prime Minister. I think it shows that he's weak on national security. I think it shows that he's not confident in his ability to lead on national security issues.
Now, you know I love my movies, and sometimes movies are really good at being able to explain some of the more complicated ways that politics works. But one thing that so often big companies, but well and truly the left of Australian politics, love to do is what I call the Jedi mind trick. This is when, famously, Obi-Wan Kenobi in episode 4 spoke to the weak-minded stormtroopers to say, "These are not the droids you're looking for."
Let me see your identification.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
He can go about his business.
You can go about your business.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
But in this episode of Star Wars, it is the Prime Minister who thinks he's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you and I are apparently the idiot stormtroopers. This is not the economy that you're living in. Because, of course, cost of living remains the number one concern for Australians, from be it here in Mildura to Melbourne to everywhere else around the country. The number one issue. So much so that even when they were trying to push the voices, the issue everyone had to talk about, Warren, the great cartoon I've shown you a couple of times, and the Daily Telegraph showed that the number one issue was cost of living, then it was the economy, then it was going to be national security, and right at the end of the list was the one that they spent $500 million on for a yes-no question that, of course, they turned from a 60-40 yes into a 60-40 no. Apparently Australians got dumber and more dinosaur-y the more they heard from the Prime Minister. But such was the Jedi mind trick. This is the referendum that you wanted. Well, unsurprisingly rather, the Prime Minister knows that this is going to be a problem for him politically, and while everything looks like worst case scenario for him is not losing office but more so losing his majority at the next election. Remember, he's only got a couple of seats. One might go to the Greens. WA doesn't look like it's going to be as good for the Labor Party, and there may well be a couple of extra Teals, including even a Teal able to take a seat of Higgins from the Labor Party, formerly of Peter Costello and the Liberal Party. So that's what he's staring down the barrel of. So cost of living. Oh, now I care. Now I care about cost of living. Now I get the cost of living. And we learned today that there is going to be a major report which is going to be delivered by the Prime Minister after he's been to Beijing, after he's been to Washington, where he's going to do like a state of the nation to remind you, the Jedi mind trick, this is not the economy that you're living in. Albo is doing better than you are right now. Well, amid global turmoil and a cost of living crisis at home, the Prime Minister will outline Labor's progress in delivering election commitments. Oh, because he's kept so many of them, hasn't he? And a strategy to address long-term challenges, including building lasting prosperity, broadening the nation's industrial base and enhancing security partnerships at a time of geostrategic competition. China. But I wonder if he'll mention any of these things as what he has done since he became Prime Minister. You see, this is the reality. This is why the Jedi mind trick thing is why I keep talking about it. Because these are the droids we're looking for. This is his record of almost 18 months, halfway through his first term in office. Take your pick. An Albo dozen of 11 interest rate rises that have happened on his watch. Remember when it was one under the previous government and it was a crisis that needed to be dealt with? Well, what does 11 mean? High petrol prices, but he won't cut the tax that his $20 billion surplus would be able to pay for. It cost $3 billion to remove 25 cents a litre off every litre of petrol you buy for the next 6 months. He could do it multiple times with the $20 billion that he's got left over, but no interest. Power prices, they were going to come down by $275. Instead, you know, here and anywhere else, they're through the roof. Inflation, everything is costing way more, including petrol, which is costing 14% more than it did at least a year ago. The Australian dollar. Now, you pay attention to this when you're about to go overseas, but if you're somebody who sends things overseas as an exporter, it's okay because you're able to make a little bit more money. But with the vast majority of things that Australians buy being stuff that is made somewhere else, China, well, of course, the cost of these things goes up because if the Australian dollar has gone down by 10 cents on Albo's watch, the cost of everything has gone up as well. Remember, this is the bloke who cares about cost of living, yet he took $1,500 out of 10 million people's tax return. Will that come up in the speech? What about the new taxes for superannuation funds or people, yes, who have $3 million in their account, but if it starts there, you know what happens. You end up paying in the end. He's failed to deliver on his 24/7 nurses in aged care promise. This government is way more secretive, not more transparent than the previous government. He's trying to censor the internet. Forget the word misinformation. It's about what you can and can't read online. Will that get a mention? Or what about the $450 million spent on the yes, no question that everyone knew was going a certain way for months? Which brings us to the end of the week of silence from many Indigenous leaders. The Prime Minister will, of course, conveniently be out of the country, where we know, according to his rules, you can't ask him any questions about what happens domestically. So it's perfectly timed that all of the criticism of the way the campaign was run and the anger that some have at the result of going from 60-40 yes to 60-40 no is now going to play out while he's, of course, completely away. And you can't ask him any questions about it. Buy the T-shirt. Well, plenty of people now, of course, are continuing their sook more than a week on, and I thought we'd move on from the sook, but there's still plenty there. Racists and elites, yes and no voters are not who you think they are. See, they're now trying to turn around and say that it's the polling results at the different booths rather than the result that really matters. Well, if that's the case, then Labor would have an even lower vote than the 33% that got them to the election result that meant they were able to get over the line, Greens preferences, and form the government. Laura Tingle, you pay her over there at the ABC, and she's linked The Voice and the Middle East war as the truth being one of the casualties of war. Thomas Mayo, the man who, of course, had plenty to say about how radical he wanted it to be, well, he wrote an interesting piece in the Saturday paper, one of the leftiest publications in the country, where he says, among other things, to my fellow Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I say we continue our push for common goals. Don't be silenced, be louder, prouder and more defiant. Of course you will be. The survival of our culture and babies depends on it. Meantime, land councils, they too have blasted the no campaign and, by extension, the majority of the country that decided to vote no as racists. Meantime, there was, of course, the group that have got together and have put together the first draft of their official response, and that is more of the collective Indigenous leadership that was behind the Yes campaign. It was leaked to the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. I read from them. It says the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were hurting and bewildered by what they feel is the viciousness of the repudiation of our peoples and the rejection of our efforts to pursue reconciliation in good faith. This is their response to a democratic election. The truth is that the majority of Australians have committed a shameful act, whether knowingly or not, and there is nothing positive that can be interpreted from it. Only the shameless could say that there is no shame in this outcome. Their statement continues to say. They haven't locked off whether that is the official position. We'll learn it all in the next couple of days. And I mentioned it before, but it's worth saying again. What's the M word that the Prime Minister and the Yes campaign have thrown around for the information they didn't want you to read on the internet?
It's misinformation.
Misinformation.
The misinformation.
The misinformation.
Misinformation.
Well, of course, the plan for that is to censor the internet. Now, I'm not cool with people finding ways to spread racism or hate. I'm not okay with people telling outright lies. I'm not okay with defamation. I'm not okay with discrimination. But misinformation is this term that is used for the things of which they disagree with. Remember, it was misinformation about masks. It was misinformation about the Wuhan lab. How many other things have been labelled misinformation? But of course, you knew them to be true at the time. It's just only months after they're not needed anymore that you're allowed to say them. Don't fall for their language on this. Albanese and his mates are trying to censor the internet. They are trying to censor your ability to share the content that you see in places like Sky News, like the media that they don't like. Because they can't say it's a lie, they can't say it's discrimination, they can't say it is defamation, they just call it misinformation. And if they want to make it illegal for you to be able to see it, then that is censoring the internet. Here in Mildura tonight, we have got plenty of things to celebrate in this beautiful part of Australia. Of course, aligning the beautiful and mighty Murray River. You can see the towns that, of course, that mighty river moves its way across 2,500 kilometres from where I sit right now in Mildura. Our nearest capital city is Adelaide, just over the border in South Australia. We're a pretty long run from Melbourne and a bloody long one from Sydney right now. 98% of Australia's dried grapes come from Mildura, 24% of the citrus fruits, and we have plenty of them on display here. Olives come from this part of the world, and 74% of table grapes come from an area with about 34,000 people. It's a great area. We're here to celebrate it, and one of the many people who've had a chance to have a look at it and celebrate for us are none other than Georgia Simpson.
In your fruit bowl, you've got a banana, a mango, a pineapple and an orange.
Yep.
What are you going to choose?
I choose the banana.
Because I can eat it one-handed on the motorbike.
Wrong, you meant to say orange.
There's no rest for the wicked. And despite his fruit choice, Kevin Koch is an orange farmer.
We have got good soil and a good climate that gives a great flavour. We're the envy of the world because our oranges are orange. A lot of countries have green oranges.
Kevin has 13,500 citrus trees on his property, mostly mandarins, Valencia and navel oranges. Each year he harvests about 400 tonnes of fruit, and all of it is picked by hand.
We haven't got a machine yet that will do it as efficiently as harvest workers.
Mildura's arid climate creates the perfect growing conditions for citrus and grapes. None of it would be possible without the Murray River, the lifeblood of the region. It's what drew George and William Chaffey to the area in the late 1880s. The Chaffey brothers set up an irrigation scheme in 1887. It eventually folded, but the move paved the way for the region to become an irrigated oasis in its hot and dry surrounds. The brothers' original homestead is still standing in Mildura today. The region is still famous for its grape production. About 250 to 300,000 tonnes of grapes are produced here each year. It works out to be 80% of Victoria's total grape production. Anthony Murphy from Trentham Estate says the climate is ideal for growing grapes. At this point in the season, the grapes are harvested and the blending and bottling process is in full swing.
I can just show you a Pinot 23 Pinot Gris that we just got ready for bottling.
So it's not quite out yet, but it will be soon.
That's right,
so I'm
yes.
lucky one getting a little taste test.
That's right.
Oh.
All it needs is to be filtered before it's bottled and ready to be sold. Anthony relies on international exports in his business. The war in Ukraine has impacted that, but it's not the only challenge.
China's been a big problem.
One of the challenges winemakers are facing at the moment is the oversupply of red wine. That oversupply is the result of tariffs imposed by China back in 2021.
The knock-on effect, because the exports just stopped for everyone, the amount of bulk red around is horrendous. I've never seen it so bad, actually. There's wine everywhere, and the value of it has dropped dramatically.
The best way we can help? Visit the region, drop into Trentham Estate and drink up.
Good stuff, George. All right, let's talk to some people who represent this area. None other than Daniel Linklater, who is the Mayor of the Wentworth Shire. He's also a grain farmer, and Dr Anne Webster is the local member for Mallee. Lovely to see you both. Give them a round of applause. Give them one more. Lovely, lovely. Well, Mr Mayor, let's talk about your other capacity, of course, as a farmer. How long has the family been on these parts?
About 40 years, Paul. My dad came up from another town in the Mallee, a little town called Speed, about 40 years ago, and started clearing Mallee scrub. So it was previously a sheep station, and through his hard work and efforts, turned it into a very productive farm today.
And how did you end up in politics?
Oh, well, as they say with us croppers, you know, we don't do anything for 6 months of the year, so time in. But no, always been an interest, and it's the opportunity was there, so I took it.
And Doctor, what's it like representing this area when you get back to Canberra? We obviously know that the Nats are very aware, but obviously right now we know everything from the Murray-Darling Basin chats that are happening. How are you finding getting the message of this area, of the Mallee, back to Canberra?
Well, it's a huge challenge, of course, for urban people such as Tanya Plibersek, did I say that out loud, to actually understand the pressure that is on our region if she takes out the 450 GL. So you've just got to talk about it, and talk about it a lot. So I feel like I, repeat myself over and over, whether it's health, whether it's water, whether it's IR laws. It all impacts the people who live in this region. So I'm just really passionate about the region. So
how do we get a better solution out of what this government's going to try to do when it comes to water? Because for obvious reasons, it matters to farmers. And we understand that there's stuff that's needed further up and stuff that's needed further down. But what does this area need as the better result than what the government's thinking about?
What we've got right now is the result of buybacks in the past, patchwork quilts of dead land versus irrigated land. And what she has taken out is the socioeconomic neutrality test, which means if it's going to be bad for a community to take out more water, then you couldn't do it under what we had placed. But she has said, no, that's actually not really that important. Our regions don't really matter that much to a Green vote or a Labor vote in Sydney. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And then also when you're representing a council, you need to get the message back to Melbourne. Again, for a lot of people that aren't paying attention, they think that, the Commonwealth Games was some big thing.
Item.
Yeah, but again, what's the stuff that you need out of, political stripe that's different, but still the people where the taxes end up in Spring Street?
Yeah, so we'll actually be meeting with the Minister next Tuesday at Menindee, so she's coming out to get a better understanding of the lakes. And in addition to what the good doctor has mentioned, we'll be arguing that we don't want Menindee lakes drained again as we head into a forecast dry period. That's what happened last time. The community are very up in arms because that's when we get these cease to flow events where the lower Darling literally has no flow and the water quality is terrible, the fish are dying and the stock can't drink the water. So that'll be one of the messages, and also, of course, the fact that our farming community are not interested, thank you very much, in another 450 GL going out of the consumptive pool.
Yeah, bloody oath. Now, obviously, there's lots of ways to stay in touch with local representatives, social media, email, all the rest of it here. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you that are watching us in the region?
My office is very, very available, and phone numbers, website, usuals, Facebook.
Good stuff. Facebook, that's the way for you too. What's the main way people get in touch with your council?
Yeah, check out the Facebook, the website, and look out for us in the street. We're the ground level.
Bloody oath. Thank you guys, do appreciate it. Give them a round of applause. I love them. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Daniel. Do appreciate it. So, you guys are probably too smart to attempt these things, or if you do, you're going to be amazing at them. But we also like to go to a bunch of clubs and see what people like to do on a Saturday. And our time here in Mildura was spent on the bike and watching people do a whole lot of roller derbying, and I was terrible at both, but okay, have a look. In Mildura, the footy club's called the Demons. The netball club is called the Demons. But the one I want to show you right now is the one that beats them all, the BMX Storm. All right, I'm officially the least impressive person to have ever attempted BMX, but these kids, you can see, from literally when they start walking, they love this sport, don't they?
Absolutely they do, Paul. So yeah, we do certainly have kids from 3, and we're very proud of our kids and what they do here. It needs very good core body strength and good balance skills. You can't just grab a bike and think that you're going to be able to go over jumps. It's not that simple.
Now you tell us. The Storm isn't the only bike club in town. In fact, there's a mountain bike club, even though there's no mountains. This is the Mildura Mountainless Bike Club. Or maybe 4 wheels is more your thing. You know I bleed red, I love Holden, and this is Mildura's Holden Museum. 30 cars, everything from a convertible EH to a Kingswood, a Premier, a Sandman, and the mighty Monaro GTS. I love this stuff. Forget the bikes and the broom brooms. The toughest sport in town is played at the Mildura Roller Derby. Here we are in the world of roller derby. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming.
So, I haven't done this in about 30 years and 100 kilos, so we'll see how it goes.
We start at 8 years old and we go all the way up through to about 60. So you've got to be able to fall, you've got to be able to take a hit.
All right, let's give it a go. These are very slippery. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Bolt doesn't have to do this. Okay, I'm going to try to go over here. I'm stuck. I think I'll make the team next year. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, everyone else. Thank you, Lee, who took care of this. Wow. All right, well, if you want some actual action, in a moment or two's time, I'm going to have a chat to a bloke who had a fight with a kangaroo. Seriously, an actual fight with a kangaroo. That in a moment's time, but let's celebrate what's great about Mildura by talking to its future, the kids from Mildura South Public.
Located on the Victorian side of the New South Wales-Victorian border is Mildura. The region has been tried and tested by the town's littlest experts. Mildura South State School students have some holiday tips for holiday makers. Get out there and make the most of it.
I love Mildura because I get to see my friends. My favourite thing about Mildura is that I was born here. There's all fun things.
I like Mildura because I can go to school and play soccer with my friends.
There's so many opportunities for me to do the things I love.
Mildura is nestled on the banks of the mighty Murray River, and these Mildura South School students think the natural landscapes are a must-see.
I like going down the river to catch yabbies and banana and pops. The animals. There's hot summer days to swim. The art centre because you can watch different people perform. I love Mildura because the Murray River are native animals. I get to go camping with my family. I love Mildura because I like going down the river. I like the Dockside Cafe because all the fishes get to come up and you get to feed them.
And, well, there's always one.
I love Mildura because I go to Melbourne.
With almost 30 other endorsements for the region, I think it's a safe bet you will have a fabulous time in Mildura.
At Bossy's Gin-porium. We're having a good one here. We're having a good night tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. I do appreciate it. It's always good to get around with our town. We're off to SA next month, but let's continue to celebrate this incredible region. Again, Georgia Simpson, our great reporter, who has got plenty to say about tourism in this area. Believe me, you could spend 2 weeks here and not even begin to see everything, but thankfully, Georgia's seen a lot of it for you.
Mildura, the jewel of Sunraysia, a shimmering oasis in the desert. For locals, life centres around the Murray River.
Mildura wouldn't be here without the river.
And it's the main draw card for visitors to the region. Tourism contributes more than $200 million to the local economy every year. Alan Barch is the captain of the Rothbury, part of the fleet from Mildura paddle steamers. The Rothbury was built in 1881. Once upon a time, it was vital in the river trade.
And that's all there was. There's only this or ox and cart and wagons, so paddle steamers and barges were the most efficient way to cart cargo in those days.
These days, it's a tourism attraction. On a 2-hour cruise, passengers get to experience going through the lock.
It's the only place in Australia that goes through the lock. You'd have to go to Europe if you want to go through a lock anywhere apart from the Murray.
The Murray River is magical. For those wanting a river experience a bit more bespoke, Dennis McLaughlin is your man.
We offer exclusive cruises on the river so you can have family, friends, and you just do a private cruise. When you get on the river, you can have a look at the sunset.
Sky News were lucky enough to be a guest of Mildura Cruises. We were treated to a private show from 4-time Golden Guitar nominee Paul Costa. The town has a buzzing arts and culture scene. The region is also home to Australia's inland botanical gardens. A landmark Mildura local, Betsy Ordino, is particularly fond of. She's a triplet. Her and her sisters, Florence and Dorothy, believe they're the oldest identical single-sex triplets in Australia.
We had a wonderful time, really, growing up.
The triplets also think Mildura is the place to be.
The weather? Wonderful. The weather, the river, the shopping, everything, really. It's a lovely place.
Mildura has more sunny days a year than the Gold Coast. So even if you visit in the depths of winter, you're sure to encounter beautiful weather.
And a trip to Mildura wouldn't be complete without visiting Orange World. Visitors can stock up on local produce, as well as take a tour of the orchards and learn everything there is to know about the citrus industry. Mario is passionate about educating tourists on the importance of shopping local.
It's so sad to see Californian oranges coming into the market when we have our beautiful Australian Valencias, and also a lot of juice that you might be drinking also comes from Brazil.
He also sells citrus peelers, allegedly invented by a Mildura local. A useful keepsake that will be right at home in your kitchen drawer.
I call them very appealing.
How good. I'm telling you, you can spend so much time there. There's lots of great things here. Now, quick shout out to our favourite places to eat in this part of the world. Sam and his mates have been here for a little while. They've just started up a great... Give them a wave, give them a round of applause, because Grill Paradise on Deakin. That's the place for one of the best meals in town, and Indian Tastemakers on Langtree. Seriously, we love you, Sam. We love the boys. They've been very kind, especially when we said, hey, can we do something at 11 o'clock at night? Yes, we can. They were good guys. Appreciate it. Speaking of, the great people of Harvey Norman, they have been magnificent. They are the reason we're able to do our town the way around the country, and they have been supporting female sport for, well, a very long time, best part of 20 years. They wanted us to tell you this month about their support for athletes who had been successful at not just one, but multiple sports. Can you believe it's 23 years ago since Cathy Freeman emerged in her iconic fireproof bodysuit to light the flame that marked the official start of Sydney's Olympics back in the year 2000. But it wasn't just the Olympic flame that she lit at those games. She sparked an almighty fire for Aussie girls watching at home.
Standing up on that podium with my teammates took me back to the 7-year-old kid that I was when I watched Cathy Freeman win gold at Sydney 2000. And for me, the Cathy Freeman moment was just like, I was so mind blown at her ability to zip up her custom-made bodysuit and race around the track and carry the weight of a nation on her shoulders. And as a little kid, I decided I wanted to do the same thing.
Chloe is one of many Australian women that Harvey Norman have been proudly supporting since 1983. And today we're meeting some of the passionate women that have been sponsored by Harvey Norman. And it's not just in one sport. You see, there are plenty of athletes who've taken on many sports. Swiss-Italian Simona Di Silvestro is a big name in car racing, and now is ready to switch her skill set to the Winter Olympics bobsledding track in 2026. She was here a couple of weeks ago to compete in Bathurst for the first time in 4 years as a wildcard contestant.
Yeah, it's a bit of a crazy dream that I've had as a kid. You know, I've always dreamt to go to the Olympics, and a few years ago I was thinking, you know, how could I achieve this goal? And I figured that bobsledding could be the sport to get me there. So yeah, it's really a bit of a crazy idea, but you know, I'm the type of person that, you know, sometimes I'm not afraid to try new things, and so far it's been going really well. It's been 2 years that I've been practicing, and this winter we'll really start doing some races in Europe.
Another multi-code female athlete is our mate Chloe Dalton, one of Australia's few triple sport elite athletes. After playing basketball, Chloe transitioned to rugby. At the 2016 Rio Olympics, Chloe won gold in the Australian Sevens team and was awarded an Order of Australia medal for her service to sport. She's now taking on a new challenge of Aussie rules.
Yeah, I was playing basketball. I was playing the WNBL with the Sydney Uni Flames, and for me, I thought I was one step closer of representing my country and hopefully going to the Olympics. And the reality hit me when I got there that I spent a lot of time sitting on the bench, waving my towel, giving out high fives, but not contributing a whole lot else to the team. I went home and I typed into Google list of Olympic sports and had a look through a few different options and saw that rugby sevens was going to be in the Olympics for the very first time. As a kid, I'd go out, I'd take a footy and find a cone and try and kick the ball, and I'd have these grown men come up to me and say, "You should play rugby, you're pretty good at kicking." And I would turn to them as a little kid and say, "Girls don't play rugby." To see that rugby was going to be played at the pinnacle of sport was a pretty special opportunity, and I set my goal pretty high to make the Australian team and get on that plane to head over to Rio.
Last but not least is Amanda Reid. When it comes to being a multi-sport star, it doesn't get better than her. She's competed in swimming in London back in 2012. Then she won a gold in cycling in 2020. She's the current world champion para-snowboarder. And she's the third Aussie female to compete at Summer and Winter Paralympics. Amanda is the first Indigenous Aussie to ever win Paralympic gold.
I was cleaning out under the house one time and I found my old cycling clothes and I was like, let's give this a go again, and that's how it all started. I went on a trip after the Paralympics in 2016 down to the snow and decided let's give snowboarding a go 2 years later after attempting to ski multiple times. And yeah, just fell in love with snowboarding.
Three talented women who are hitting new highs every day. A trio of role models that'll inspire the next generation of kids to do the same at Brisbane 2032 and way beyond. Welcome back to Mildura. There was an incredible bit of footage that made its way around the world. Have a look at this. It's a bloke fighting a kangaroo.
I'm gonna punch your head in. Look at my dog.
Now, Mick's the bloke who did it. Why did you have to fight a kangaroo?
I had my dog.
So the dog was drowning?
Yes.
So you thought, OK, I've got to somehow get in.
I was basically standing on the edge of the river, stretching my legs out for about 2 minutes, listening to a podcast. I had a phone right here and listening away, and I looked back to the river where three dogs were drinking water, and then I noticed that one was missing. And so I stopped stretching, walked around a little bit, had a look in the car park, and then I looked into the river about 15 metres and I saw the kangaroos just stand there staring at me. I was like, that's odd.
I like that you thought you could talk to it first.
Well, I actually...
I don't know what language they speak, but I think Skippy was more... than make me effing dog.
Yeah. Now, my mum knows I swear now.
Fair enough. It's a terrible thing for mums to know. So, OK, how long does one push and shove with a...
Well... the reason I had the video is because I told a Brazilian friend 6 weeks ago at that exact spot that this thing happens. And as soon as I was watching it happen, I was like, if I video it, he can't not believe me, because he didn't. So I started videoing it, and it probably took about 10 minutes for me being, technologically inept to get the phone working. And I was on top of the kangaroo at this stage, done all the shouting I could have, and then next thing you know, I threatened it, and you can't threaten something and not follow through. Otherwise,
no,
yeah. So,
of course.
And then I've just...
It's the law of the jungle, I understand.
The other roos will laugh at me, so...
But you've got to save your dog, you've got to save your dog, and you've got to take on the kangaroo. This thing went global.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Like, were you surprised that, like...
I was gobsmacked.
Proper news TV is talking about this all over the place.
I was completely... I woke up on Monday morning and I remember looking straight up at the ceiling and just went, that actually happened. And then it sort of came back, and then I looked at my phone and I had these requests from interviews in Canada and BBC and Lad Bible, and I just went, oh, no. And I actually felt sick in the stomach from it.
Well, if anyone would like to, do you run the jiu-jitsu gym? Or you go to
my wife actually owns the gym. I'm the principal instructor.
Okay, so if you want to learn how to take on a kangaroo, feel free at any time. Mick, thank you, mate. I'm glad the dog's okay.
Yeah, the dog's fine.
I'm glad the dog's okay. The kangaroo is okay.
Yeah, everyone's okay.
Yeah, send your complaints to the ABC, because I don't care. Yeah. All right, now, after the break, we have been doing something all week, and I've got to say, I thought it would take all week to do. We did it in a couple of days, and that was to be able to raise money to make sure that we can leave something good for the kids of Mildura. We will do that after the break. Hey, quick shout out to lovely Jan, who is Rob, one of the great people who work on this show. She lives in Canberra. Strength and love to you, darling. We are so glad that you watch the show. I really appreciate it. Now, I've been bowled over this week that so many people responded as quickly and passionately as they did to my plea for us to be able to leave something behind after our towns. Now, Humpty Dumpty is a magnificent foundation, and it's a foundation that helps link hospitals that need the medical equipment that little sick kids need in their earliest days of life. It is a phenomenal charity. And we thought, OK, what does Mildura want? Well, Mildura needs an incubator that's about 40 grand. Let's go all week. Let's go hard. Well, within a couple of nights, the numbers have been unbelievable. And to join us to talk about not just what's happening in Mildura, but the cause generally, Paul Francis is the founder and the executive director of Humpty Dumpty, and Katrina Allen is with Mildura Base Hospital. Thank you both for being here. Paul, what's the number we eventually got to here?
Well, it's still coming in, Paul. So at the moment it's 120,000, but we've had some donations late on Friday, which will be another 40,000 that will come in the next couple of days. So, yeah, unbelievable result, unbelievable.
Everyone, that is, seriously, how good is that? So, you know, Paul, the problem here is that, again, you're not political. I don't want to be political. Thank you for letting us help here. Why do people have to donate this stuff?
It's you know, we're talking about Mildura at the moment, but it's the same in every state in Australia, Paul. Simply the state governments and the federal governments just don't have the money to fund what we need in our hospitals and what our doctors and nurses need. So, you know, in New South Wales alone, a third of the budget goes on health, and it's really up to the community to make up the difference. If you know, and certainly through your show, there's made a huge difference. I mean, there's probably 8 pieces of equipment that are going to go into Mildura Hospital now. Really, really essential equipment.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it, and everyone who did behind the scenes of work with us as well. So, Katrina, let's talk about what Mildura is going to get and about how it's going to help a little kid in their first days. Let's talk about the incubator first. That was the original idea, 45,000. With 120, with even maybe a little more, there's a lot more to come. What does the incubator do?
The incubator helps us to care for brand new babies, particularly the unwell ones. We're up here by ourselves. We take whatever comes. Sorry, I've got a bit of feedback in my ear.
That's all right. Just yank it out. Don't worry. Don't worry. You don't need to hear anybody. It's okay. Just keep going.
Yeah, so we look after whatever comes our way, particularly for resuscitation and stabilisation of little tiny babies, and before we send them away. This sort of equipment is amazing. It gives our skilled clinical staff the best opportunity to care for these babies, to stabilise them and send them off. But additionally, it helps us to bring babies back.
So, and this is what's vital, right? Now, on top of this, a breast pump that's worth about $3,500. More training mannequins so your staff can be across everything, a couple of those, humidification systems, that's what all the extra money is going to go to. So Mildura has now got something that's going to help for a little while,
It's amazing. It's an amazing outcome. We're very grateful. We're thankful to you and to Sky News and to the Humpty Dumpty Foundation and everybody that's donated, because every little thing helps us to look after our community members.
Well, Katrina, to you and your staff, it's our pleasure. Every little life needs to be taken care of, and this is the equipment that will help do that for the next little while. So, again, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who gave. Thank you to Paul. I really appreciate it. We'll do this again next month, and the plan is to pick one piece of equipment for a location, each and every location that we go to. That's our show for Mildura. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the good people here at Fossey's. We look forward to joining you again next month. The Royal Report is on Sky News right now. All right, let's enjoy some gin. See you, Mildura.